What's up, YouTube? It's Joe Catchpolia sitting on the couch, making some money investing in fractional real estate online. As usual, it is quite a treat to have another Mogul property already. If you were paying attention, the Foundry already sold out, which is mind-blowing. I think the key to selling out quickly for most of the Mogul properties is to be one that I say I'm not going to buy, although there are a few exceptions. That's another one that just sold out lightning fast that I did not buy a piece of. Just remember, just because I decide not to doesn't mean that you shouldn't. But this one has been widely anticipated, right? We already have the Roman on the platform. It's a short-term rental on Lake Houston or near Lake Houston. This they're calling the Roman 2, saying, it's very similar property. It looks like they're paying the same price for it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the normal due diligence that we do, but I also want to just compare it a little bit to the Roman. Because that's the comparison they're making. So I wanted to see, how fair is that really? And when we get to the end, you'll have to decide for yourself, right? They're raising $273,000, projecting a year one yield at 10.2%, average yield of 15, levered IRR 14.8. Which these are flip-flopped. I think it might be because of the extra cost of furnishing. I'm not 100% positive that's what's going on, but that's what it looks like to me. Okay, so they talk a lot about the Roman, how it's one of the best performing assets, or maybe the best performing asset on the platform. I'm not sure, but one of the best at least. And how this is very similar location, 5-bedroom, 3-bath, 3,100 square feet. The Roman, I think, is 4-bedroom, 3-bath, and a tiny bit less square feet. In-ground pool, hot tub. They just had a renovation. So the pictures we have aren't even of the property the way it looks today. Mogul's second asset in the high perform. Oh, no. Okay, never mind. Second asset in this area. It's, I already said Airbnb. So, this is the info that we got. But so one, I want to talk about, you might not know this. So this is the market right here. You probably want to call that Humble, Texas, if you are not from the area. But that's actually Humble, Texas. They don't pronounce the H, so this is Humble, Texas. At least anybody that I've ever met that's from there, that's how they say it. I still half the time say Humble because that's what it looks like to me. What's really strange, though, okay, you can see this. This is the outline of the city limits of Humble. And this is where the property actually is. So it's outside the city, and the other one is down here, and it's listed as a Houston address. I think what it is all of these are really in what we call unincorporated areas, right? They're outside of city limits, just inside of still in Harris County, but outside of city limits. If you here, it looks like it's assigned to the Humble schools, and so you end up sometimes with just addresses that don't necessarily, equal exactly where you are. So I guess that's what's going on here. I thought that was kind of interesting. I still decided, so I looked it up because I was really confused at first because of where it was. It just didn't look right to me. But that is the address the public records have for it. It is Humble ISD it was where it's being taxed. So, that seems right. It just always throws me off. And we have this in my market too, right? Where you just have certain areas where you'll have an address that you're just like, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make a ton of sense. But so still looked at the info from Humble, even though this isn't 100% important, but it's a city that has, it's a very small city, and it's grown pretty rapidly. But all of it is in the Houston MSA, and I've mentioned before, I really like the Houston market. Look at this growth, right? And this is why I like it, right? I mean, there's just such strong, population growth. It's just increased demand, and I mean, to have a 20% in a decade when you're starting with almost 6 million is really unheard of, right? You've heard me talk about before, like as you get larger and larger populations, it's harder to continue that percentage growth. And so this is a very, very rapidly growing city. Now, yes, they do also have a lot of places where they can build. So there's, a lot of additional supply that is able to come onto. But just so much demand like that is why, one of the main things that I like to look at. Really it's why whenever there's stuff in Houston, I really want to like it, right? If there's any way I can get my head around buying it, I'm going to. Let's see. I'm going to just jump into some of these ones that always mess my computer up so I can close them as we go. Let's see. We got the FEMA flood map. We are outside of the floodplain. You can see that we're close, but obviously that's because we're close to the lake, and then we have a waterway going, right behind the property, which for what we're doing here, this is a great amenity to have, right? And I'll show you a little. No, that's not the map. Yeah, this is the one. You can see you've got a little walking trail. I don't know if you have access through this back gate. Often you will in areas like this. I don't know. And if not, if it's something where they're allowed to add, but a lot of times people really like that. And if not, you just go down to the to the corner and you can get on there too. So nice little amenity to have there. And this is me comparing it to, this is the Roman 1. So I'm going to do this quite a bit, right? So, okay, you can see if you compare those, yeah, I think I'd actually, if I'm going to have a short-term rental, I'd rather not be squished in a neighborhood like this, right? I'd rather have that direct access. So I think that's a good thing. I'm going to close those. This is the spot crime map. I mean, you can see in this area, there's just nothing reported. Does that mean there's no crime? Maybe. Maybe it means it's a reporting issue because, it has to do with when you are in these unincorporated areas, sometimes who you report crimes to ends up getting a little bit weird. Because it might not be the city. It might only be the county that you're, other than like on the main roads. So I don't know if that's what's going on here or if it's really just there's no crime. It is a really nice looking neighborhood, so I think it's possible that there's just nothing happening in there. So let me get back into this. Let's see, close that out. I'm going to close this out as well. One of the things I wanted to look at is, so we're comparing, this is the Roman 1 and this is the Roman 2. So we're really kind of further away from each other than I expected when you have a 1 and 2, right? I think this was like, well, let me get rid of I'm going to tell you about the airport first and then I'll get rid of that. Let's see. So one of the things I find that really affects how well my short-term rentals do in our market is how close they are to the airport. A lot of people, and there is a second airport, but the George Bush Airport's the closest one to here. And so a lot of people, when they're traveling, they pull up their, they're like, okay, they pull up the map. They're like, this is where I am. Let me look at the map on Airbnb. Where am I going to get close to? Well, these are pretty much the same distance. The Roman 1 is, I think, 5 minutes closer to the airport than the Roman 2. 32 minutes versus 37 minutes. I don't think that's a huge deal. But looking at how far apart they are 14 minutes apart, right? So this is not exactly the same market. It is the same lake area, but so one of the things with short-term rentals that I've found in my market, so I'm in San Antonio, Texas. We do a lot of short-term rental business here, but we have a lake nearby that is is a tourist destination. I'd say somewhat similar. It's about this far away from our downtown. Maybe ours is a little, ours is called Canyon Lake. Maybe Canyon Lake's a little further away from our downtown than this is from theirs, but not too much difference. And I've found that you can have, depending on your position on the lake, you can go from having a fantastic short-term rental to not a great one, right? And a lot of it has to do with the difference in views, the difference in lake access, and then just how long it takes you to get there from downtown. Because even though I just showed you the map to the airport, a lot of time these lake homes are just being rented by somebody in the city who wants to get out of the city for the weekend and meet up with a bunch of family members. I actually just did this recently, where stayed in it wasn't a lake house, it was by a river, but the same thing, big house, bunch of people stayed there, had a pool, the same general idea. But a lot of times, the difference in, if you're coming from downtown or, somewhere, or the south side of the city, like if you're in Friendswood or somewhere like that, you're adding 15 minutes to your drive. Okay, not a huge deal. Your lake access might be different depending on the two neighborhoods. So I know at least in Canyon Lake, where I work, look at a lot of stuff, this sort of a difference could mean a huge difference in the performance of the property. Now, one big difference there, though, is in Canyon Lake, it's part of the hill country, and so the views change a lot because of elevations. I think it's a lot flatter here, so you're not going to have that same issue, but you will certainly have the extra drive time. At first, I was worried because this one's close to a Shipley's Donuts, and that one's not. But if you zoom in, see, this is one of the things that fat people really think about when they're traveling, right? Talking about myself here, not talking about anybody else. But there is, where is it? Oh, Cane's here too, HEB. But I did find a Shipley's Donuts super close to here, right? It doesn't have to be your preferred donut vendor, but I think that, I think having one really close to you when you're in a short-term rental is kind of nice. Some kind of donuts, anyway. Again, could just be me. I don't even think I opened the listing yet, right? So this is the property. I mean, it's a really nice looking property. They said these are old pictures, that it's just been fully renovated. What does that mean to us, though? It means it's not currently operating, right? So this is one that they are, and you can see there's none of the discussion like there usually is about we have a year of actuals that we're projecting against. And I think that's why they're making the comparison to the Roman one, because it kind of gives some credibility to their projections. It is, because they don't have them in place. And so I wanted to make sure that's not lost on anybody, right? And especially if they just finished the renovation, of course it's not going to be operating during the renovation, right? So I just want to keep that in mind. Let's see. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about those projections, right? Because again, they're using numbers. They're saying, nearby properties average between 89,000 and 99,000, and they're projecting 86.4. I couldn't come up with these numbers, right? So I was messing around with AirDNA for a while. Now, this just came out today, so obviously I didn't spend 10 hours on this. I just spent a few. But I could not come up with these comps where, what they're defining as nearby. I couldn't find similar sized properties that were, anywhere near that. This 78,000 was the highest one I could find. And this one does have a pool and a hot tub. So that was tough for me, right? Now, one of the things I want you to keep in mind is that AirDNA has a really hard time, even when they are looking at other ones with pools and whatnot. So I pulled AirDNA today for the Roman one. I don't know if you could see this. So 52,000 is the projection from AirDNA. And I did, 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, 10 guests. This listing says 428, but everywhere else it says it's a 5-3. And so I can't imagine that you're only putting 8 guests in there. 5-3 here, 5-3 here, and then in the email, I think also. So I'm assuming the 5-3 is right. And this is pulling it from map data. My guess is when they did the renovation is when that changed. If I were going to invest in this one, that might be something I'd want to contact them and just get them to verify. If anyone has done that and you want to put that info in the Discord, I'd appreciate it. Which reminds me, please like and subscribe. In the description to this video, I've got a link to a Discord I have set up where a whole bunch of us talk about Mogul and Lofty and Ground Floor and Arrived and lots of other platforms on a regular basis. Feel free to click that link, join us, and jump into any of the discussions. Also in the description to this video, I have referral links to Mogul and to the club that I'm in Mogul and all the other sites that I'm currently investing in fractional real estate online. Please feel free to use those links, but you want to do your own due diligence on the platforms and on the properties. Just because I do or don't buy one doesn't mean that you should. Okay. So let's see. What was I just saying? I talk about it and then I get distracted. But let's see. So I'm going to just stop. All right. So I was just talking about, if you might want to verify this is a 5-3, not a 4-2, just because of the discrepancy. But I think that's something. I'm just assuming this happened because of the renovation. But again, it's easy to reach out to them. They're super quick to respond if you just use the little thing on the bottom right. I've gotten quick responses there, or emailing them. So that's been nice. So okay, so I could not recreate that projection, right? The minus 52, but they also say that the Roman is only going to be 71. And when I look at the Roman 1's actual right? Do they have the actual performance in here now? I thought I found it somewhere. Because I didn't invest in this one, so I probably I don't have the actual performance for it. But that one, they had projected 88, 92 for year two, and I know they're running above, I know where I found it actually, was in there. So they projected 71, but this is the Roman here, which with 99,000. So obviously it's outperforming almost 30,000. If you had a similar outperformance on here, you'd get into the 80s, right? So AirDNA isn't perfect. It doesn't always pick stuff up, but relatively speaking, this one does show as if it's going to be almost $20,000 worse than the Roman one. And so it is, I mean, one of the things, because we sell a whole bunch of short-term rentals here in town, it's just as much an art as it is a science. As much as we have data, the look of the home, the layout, there's all sorts of things that can go into whether, what you're actually going to make on the property. However, if I were selling a property like this to a client of mine here in town, and I don't know that I mention this that often, I work for PMI Birdie Properties. I think I'm supposed to probably say that when I'm start talking about this, my business, and, just as a disclosure there. But anyway, whenever I'm, showing somebody something, if I can't come up with AirDNA comps, I very rarely would recommend they move forward unless they just have a very strong belief that they're going to outperform for some reason. Do I think they can really dig into this 5.3 here and say, and this is the one with a pool and a hot tub? Because a lot of these don't have the pools, and say, okay, well, I think I'm going to hit this 78 number pretty easily. That seems like a reasonable thing. But it does worry me that it just AirDNA thinks it's so much different from the Roman one. And then if we look at how those projections have changed over time, this is the Roman 2. And let's look at that same chart for the Roman 1. So for some reason, it thinks, we're not talking about a big different, distance apart, right? It's 15-minute drive. But for some reason, AirDNA thinks that it's a much different situation in these two properties. So it's something to keep in mind. And then the other thing so that gives me a lot of hesitation. Oh, before I forget about this property is in a HOA. When I look on Zillow, let's see, HOA, yes, HOA fees. I normally try to avoid HOAs when I'm using, when I'm buying short-term rentals. Similar to the discussion that we had with the pad splits, HOAs can, make rules, outlaw short-term rentals. They can do that whenever they want, even if they currently are allowing for it. But you can see the Roman 1 is also in a HOA and has been operating. One of the times where I think there's a bit of an exception to this rule is when you're in these like lake, beach areas, lake areas, mountain areas, where everybody expects them to be vacation homes for people. In those areas, I'm less worried about it, but it is still something I don't like, right? I don't like being in a HOA when I'm trying to do anything other than a long-term rental. And there are even some HOAs where they want to limit how many long-term rentals are in an area. Those typically get challenged and have a very difficult time holding up, but it's something that to just keep in mind, right? So this isn't an HOA. Again, that's something that, is not great as far as I'm concerned. And then in addition to that, we've got, purchase price $450,000. The MLS coverage that I have, I couldn't really get good comps in this area. So I really just relying on all the third-party sites like Zillow. Zillow says 356. Okay, well, that's rough. Homes.com, has a range, but only goes up to 395. What am I on? Realtor, 362. And Redfin, 385. So all of those are but they do at least give you a range that goes up to close to where we spent. One of the things I wanted to do is say, okay, well, they spent $450 on the Roman 1 as well. Like, what does Zillow think about that? Well, it says the Roman 1's worth $461, and Realtor says it's $445, and Redfin 432, but with the range going all the way up to almost 500. And I didn't pull up the homes.com for the Roman one. But so you can see, again, relatively speaking, the third-party websites thinks that the Roman 1 is a nicer property than the Roman 2. And we're spending the same amount on the two of them. So that worries me a little bit, right? Like, because we are comparing it. So like, and even if you just look at the numbers that they projected on each, 17.5 and 18, and we've got 15 and 14.8. So it seems like they're also expecting that we're not doing as well. So I wouldn't get too caught up in that comparison without really looking at, okay, how do they actually compare to each other? They did provide these comps that look really good. So they did provide these comps. Sorry about that. That seem to do, especially this one, right? That seem to imply that the price works pretty well. If you notice, this is the only one that is a higher price per square foot. It's also in a slightly different neighborhood. And so I was looking at this neighborhood map. So it looks like, well, maybe it's not actually in here. But it looked like it was in this green versus this. I'm actually not 100% positive about it now that I'm looking back at it. And I closed that map because I had way too many tabs open. So I'm just not sure. I'm just not sure if this comp is really a great comp. And, because, sometimes just a little bit different neighborhood can change things drastically. Because this one, right, this is 500 square feet larger. It is the most recent sale, and on a dollars per square foot basis, it's less than what we're paying, right? This is the only one that really would justify that price. Now, it is a brand new renovation, and so none of these sites actually take that into account. And on top of that, we know that Mogul always has a an appraisal contingency, and they're not going to buy it if it doesn't appraise. I think that I still have a problem with, even if it does appraise, I'm still a little bit worried about that valuation, right? I'd like to, I'd want to dig into a lot more, like, is this one, it could be, again, because this is the only one that really seems to justify it, is being in that next, subdivision over, how much of a difference does that really make? And you could take some time, homes.com, and use their tool and really figure that out. Maybe, right? Like they'd have to have enough comps that you could keep doing it. I didn't do that today. I wanted to get, my general thoughts on this out pretty quickly. But yeah, so I think valuation wise, it's a little bit rough. And let's see, and then how did they do over here? It looks like, this one, yeah, this one is a little bit off, but it looks like they had closer comps for the Roman 1 too. So I don't know. I guess, does it mean it's a bad deal? Like, well, it does look like we're going to have a valuation issues, but maybe we're not. We'll get an appraisal and see. But it seems like from everything that I've looked at so far that these two neighborhoods are just not really the same, right? One of the things, though, it looks like the Roman 1 is around here, and then this is the Roman 2. And so I think they are basically the same color. I think it's in this section, and this is just showing, the higher value neighborhoods versus the low value neighborhoods. So this looks like it's pretty similar. It's tough to tell without the greens being right next to each other, and also because I'm a tiny bit colorblind with red green, not terribly. There's only like two of the numbers I can't read on the test, but to me they seemed pretty similar. Although this is closer to more dark green, and this is closer to more of the light, right? So I guess, is this yellow? I think we get to yellow there. So again, it just seems like maybe it's a little bit worse of a neighborhood, a little bit, not as great. It does. AirDNA thinks it's going to be a little bit worse. All the third-party websites think the value shouldn't necessarily be the same. Oh, one thing I did want to point out, though, is they all have a smaller size. Oh, no, this one's got the right size for Zillow. Yeah. So a couple of them have a smaller size than what we have it listed on as, right? And so I don't know. I'm not sure if there was square footage added because we've got 3159. So does this represent the fact that there's more square footage than there was before from the renovation? Or is it just a remeasure with an appraisal? I don't know. But, it's a couple hundred square feet. So that, that makes a real difference when you're talking about the price point per square foot that we're talking about here. So let's see. Let's see if there's anything else I really wanted to talk about. Oh, did I show you the crime? Yeah, I already showed you the crime map. That looked perfectly fine. That is something we don't need to look at. I'm going to close this now. Again, all these third parties, I think they just they do all point to the Roman 1 being a better property than the Roman 2. Now, if you look at their predictions, yeah, I mean, they seem to acknowledge that as well, right? Like, I mean, they're not predicting the same type of return. One of the things, though, that I think that the Roman 1 has going for it is the debt, right? I think that they had much higher debt last year. Am I right about that? 7.875. They did predict a refinance in year 3 to make, so, which, obviously is already turning out, well, I don't know if 5% really makes it. What happens if you shut that off? Oh, I think the Roman was out before. Yeah, so that changes their numbers quite a bit. This was out before I think I bought into, before I got onto Mogul. That's super interesting. Let's see what happens when we do this on here. Shut that refinance. So where are we at? We're at 15 and 14.8. If we lose the refinance, we are at 14.9 and 14.2. So, I just don't really think we need that refinance to make this work. Just to recap, my 3 real hesitations. One, the AirDNA just doesn't justify the 89,000 comps as far as revenue. It doesn't mean that it's right and they're wrong, right? I mean, they have they're using the Roman 1. Whether or not that's one that they, is appropriate, I don't know. And I guess, yeah, they're actually giving us these AirDNA numbers. I wonder if I could look those up. I don't usually do that because I usually just count on it. But so, they have a couple others. These look like similar size, right? And so if you look those up and see where do those fit on the map, that'd be something. If anybody does that, jump in the Discord or jump in the comments. Let me know. Let me know if you think these two are these close enough to ours that we think it makes sense and as similar. Because I just didn't see them when I was looking on the AirDNA map, but it doesn't mean they're not there. Sometimes it just is weird about what it gives me. But I mean, so if we really trust that number, then do we really trust the valuation? Because all of these. Oh, one thing I wanted to point out with this though is I kind of think. It was giving us higher numbers at first, or in the past, and then we have a big drop. And I don't know if it did this in response to this being listed for sale and then pulled off the market. I don't know if it takes that into account or not, but I think it was renovated after this. I think the renovation happened after this. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe that. That'd be another question to ask, right? Like, because if this was listed for this amount and didn't sell, I mean, it was only listed for 5 days, though. That's kind of interesting. But if that were the case and it didn't sell and then we pay $450, well, that seems crazy. And this is not a situation where it's coming furnished. It does not appear, especially because when we look at like how much is being reserved in closing costs, there is like a pretty big chunk in like miscellaneous. That I think is probably for furnishing and decor, partially. I know part of this ends up being their fee, but there still leaves like $50,000 or something that is unaccounted for. So I think that's what's going on there. Not 100% certain about that either. So yeah, leaving you with some open questions. But so, revenue side, a little questionable. Valuation, a little questionable. And then I really just don't like being in HOAs. I think like I said, it's a little bit less worrisome when you're in a market where you expect to have more vacation homes. But this isn't necessarily like a destination vacation market. It is, a lake market that's a suburb. So I'm not sure how I feel about that. For all of those reasons, I think I'm just not going to buy this one. Again, just because I don't buy it doesn't mean that you shouldn't. You just have to make your own judgments. I think it's 100% possible that they get this up and running and it performs exactly as well as the Roman one. This is just one of those situations where the third-party data that I'm able to dig up doesn't seem to support that. But there's often times in my market where we can pick a home and just know based on other ones that we have that it's going to do equally as well, even though sometimes the data is not going to help us to really show that, right? It may just be that there aren't enough homes like this with a pool, with a hot tub nearby, with the same access to the water and whatnot, for AirDNA to give us good numbers, right? And so it's perfectly possible that whoever Mogul is working with in this area as their Airbnb manager, has better data or a better feel for this than I do. I mean, they 100% they do. They have to. But at the same time, I just have to trust the due diligence that I have access to when I'm making these decisions. And, again, this is the type 1, type 2 error. Like, not buying a deal that ends up being a great deal is a much, much less of a mistake than buying a deal that ends up not being a good deal, right? I mean, there's passing up a good deal or a great deal is the lesser of those two errors. And so I'm just going to decide, not to buy this one. Now, of course, if we get some new data that makes me change my mind about any of those things, it might be, something that I grab. Still a big fan of the platform. I actually bought a little bit more of the Gilmore yesterday, and as the Swift gets closer to selling out, I'll probably buy a piece of that one. I don't know. I did videos about both of those. They're in the Mogul playlist if you want to watch them. But yeah, for me, this one, there's just too many questions that I wasn't comfortable with. I think it's smart marketing on their part that they're comparing it to the Roman one because the Roman one's doing well. It has a track record. It is similar. But I just don't know, that's 5 or 6 miles apart. How much of a difference is that really making? Because I know that can make a huge difference, even though they're both on Lake Houston, or by Lake Houston. So I don't know. That's really all I've got to say about that. Interested to hear what everybody else has to say about this property. The Discord, especially in Mogul, there's been a couple of guys that have really added a lot of value around specific deals as they come out. Not to say all the lofty degenerates don't also add value. It's different kinds of value, right? We hardly ever get good songs in the Mogul thread, where we have a lot of them in lofty. But there's just been some really detailed analysis of some of these, and I appreciate that. So please keep sharing that stuff. I'm curious if someone, if any of you come to a different decision on this one, please share why you did in the comments or in the Discord, either one. Anyway, until next time, I'm going to just keep making mistakes so that you don't have to.